When you walk into a room, you're scanning the environment. You want to know who's in charge, who's the leader, who's following, who's pretending, who's authentic. That ability to read people, to know when someone's putting on a mask or when someone is showing you who they really are, is a skill that takes time to hone. It's about paying attention to the subtle cues, the energy people radiate, and the way they communicate, not just with their words, but with their bodies and actions. Now, let's talk about how to spot an ill person. I'm not talking about someone who's physically sick. I mean the person who's sick in their spirit, the one who brings negativity wherever they go. There's a difference between someone who's going through a rough patch in life and someone who chooses to spread their poison. This isn't about making judgments from a distance. This is about observing patterns of behavior, the way they speak, the way they treat others, and the way they carry themselves. First of all, understand this: the ill person is not just unhappy, they thrive on making others unhappy too. There's a difference between someone who's struggling with their own demons and someone who actively works to drag you down into their darkness. It's subtle at first. It starts with words that seem harmless, but over time they erode your confidence. You know the type people who say things like, "I wouldn't get my hopes up if I were you," or "That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen." They never encourage, they only discourage. They know how to use sarcasm to make you feel small. They know how to use humor to mask their bitterness. But don't be fooled by the mask. The ill person is good at wearing it. They've been doing it for years, so they've mastered the art of pretending. They'll act like they're happy for you, like they care about your success, but you can see it in their eyes. The slight pause before the forced congratulations, the smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. It's like they're giving you a compliment, but there's no warmth behind it. Let me tell you something: if you pay attention to these subtle signs, you'll start seeing a pattern. This is where the truth lies. Watch the way they treat others. One of the biggest giveaways is how they talk about people when they're not around. Someone who's really about that positive energy, they speak with respect about others. Even if someone has done them wrong, they don't degrade the person, they address the behavior, not the person, but the ill person. They'll tear someone down the moment they get the chance. They'll talk about people behind their backs, they'll gossip and spread rumors. And the worst part is, they do it in a way that makes it sound like they're the ones who have been wronged. They play the victim to the extreme. But here's the catch: when you listen closely, you'll hear the same patterns of negativity. They'll criticize others in ways that reveal their own insecurities. They're never the problem in their story, always the victim. But in reality, they are the problem. That's one way you can spot them. But there's more. The energy in the room shifts when they walk in. It's like the air gets heavier. You ever notice how certain people just suck the life out of a conversation? You could be having a great time, everyone's laughing, and then they say something negative, something sharp, and all of a sudden the room goes quiet. It's like the wind has been knocked out of the sails. The energy is different because they've injected their negativity into it. But it doesn't stop there. The ill person isn't just someone who brings down the vibe in a group. They also make everything about them. Every conversation is about them, their problems, their issues. They talk over people, they ignore your feelings, and they can't hold space for others. They always have to be the center of attention, and if they're not, they'll do whatever it takes to make sure they are. Think about the way they tell stories. You know they're not being honest because the story always paints them as the hero. They could be telling you about a simple encounter with someone, but somehow they manage to make it all about how they were mistreated, how they were disrespected. They exaggerate, twist facts, and play the victim in ways that make you question your own judgment. It's manipulation, pure and simple. And it's subtle. At first, you might think they're just venting or letting off steam. But if you're paying attention, you start to realize that there's a pattern. You realize that every time they talk about something, they manage to make it about their own suffering, their own pain. They're constantly seeking validation, constantly looking for sympathy, because at the core of who they are, they're insecure. They don't know how to stand on their own, so they tear others down to make themselves feel better. But the biggest giveaway, the one that will really open your eyes, is the way they deal with conflict. When things get tough, when the heat is on, when everything's falling apart, the ill person reveals themselves. They don't rise to the occasion. They don't look for solutions. They create chaos, they create chaos, they feed off of it. They like to see people struggle. They like to see people sweat. They'll make things worse just to feel like they have control. They'll manipulate situations to keep you off balance, to keep you uncertain. They will make a mountain out of a molehill just so they can watch you scramble. And when they do this, when they stir up that drama, when they create confusion, they'll turn around and act like they're the only ones who know how to fix it. They'll present themselves as the savior, the one with all the answers, the one who's holding it together. But the truth is, they're the reason everything's falling apart in the first place. They're the ones who can't let go of their bitterness, who can't forgive, who can't move on. They love to see the chaos, they thrive in it, because it gives them a sense of power. But here's the thing you need to understand about the ill person: they are masters of disguise. They're good at pretending, at wearing a mask. They'll show you one side of themselves, and then when you're not looking, they'll show you another. It's like they're always playing a part, always trying to convince you that there's someone they're not. It's a game to them. But the thing about games is, eventually the truth comes out. The mask slips. And when it does, that's when you'll see them for who they really are. When you spot an ill person, you'll feel it deep inside you. Your gut will tell you something's wrong. You'll feel the tension in the air. It's like your instincts are screaming at you, telling you to be careful. Because when someone is really ill, they leave behind a trail. They leave behind a pattern of negativity, of manipulation, of emotional chaos. It might be subtle, but it's there. If you're paying attention, you'll see it. And once you see it, you'll never be fooled again. Now let's talk about how you deal with these people. The key is to protect your peace. Don't let them drag you into their world. Don't let them manipulate you into believing that you're the problem. They will try to make you feel guilty. They will try to make you doubt yourself. They will try to convince you that they are the victim and you are the villain. But don't buy into it. The moment you do, you've lost. Set boundaries. Don't let them get too close. Don't let them into your inner circle. Because the more you let them in, the more they will poison your life. Be kind, but be firm. Don't allow them to push you around. And when it comes to your own energy, protect it. The ill person will drain you. They will take everything you have and leave you with nothing but frustration and confusion. But you don't have to engage with them. You don't have to let them control your emotions. They will try to get under your skin. They will try to provoke you, but you have the power to choose how you react. Don't let them win. You are in control of your own peace. And if you choose to let them go, if you choose to cut ties, if you choose to remove their negative energy from your life, then you've already won. You don't owe them anything. And that's the truth. When you spot an ill person, it's not just about recognizing their behavior, it's about protecting yourself. Because the longer you let them stay in your life, the more damage they will do. And once you see who they really are, it's up to you to decide whether or not you're going to let them stay. An ill person can be identified by the way they affect the energy in a room. Their negativity often disrupts positive interactions and creates a heavy, uncomfortable atmosphere. Pay attention to how you and others feel after engaging with them. Ill people often mask their true intentions with hollow compliments and insincere praise. While they may act supportive or friendly on the surface, their actions or subtle remarks reveal their underlying bitterness and disdain. They tend to manipulate situations to make themselves the center of attention, casting themselves as victims and using drama or conflict to gain control. Watch for this recurring pattern, especially when things go wrong. They rarely take responsibility. Interacting with an ill person can leave you feeling emotionally drained and confused. Protect your peace by setting firm boundaries, refusing to engage in their manipulations, and distancing yourself from their toxic behavior. You walk into a room, the conversation is flowing, people are laughing, and there's an overall sense of comfort and ease. You're in the middle of enjoying yourself, and then something changes. It's subtle at first, but unmistakable. The laughter quiets, the conversation stumbles, and there's this feeling in the air, like a cold wind that came out of nowhere, sweeping through the warmth of the moment. It's as if the room itself takes a deep breath, and everyone's energy shifts just slightly, but enough for you to feel it. And then there they are, the person who caused the shift. They've entered the room, and with them, the atmosphere has changed. This isn't a coincidence. This is the subtle energy shift that an ill person brings. They may not speak a word, but their very presence changes the dynamics of the environment. It's an almost imperceptible force, a change in the vibrations that everyone feels, but no one fully acknowledges. You can't see it, but you can certainly sense it. It's like an invisible weight that falls over everything, and it's not one you can easily shake off. You might think it's just you, maybe your mood has changed, but as you look around, you can see that others feel it too. The energy in the room is no longer light, no longer carefree. It's heavy, uncertain. People become quieter, their body language tighter. The entire tone of the space has shifted, and now you're all walking on eggshells trying to figure out why you suddenly feel like something isn't right. The concept of energy shift is not some mystical or supernatural idea. It's rooted in human behavior, in how we interact with each other on an emotional and psychological level. Every person we encounter brings their own unique energy with them. Our emotions are contagious, and we often unknowingly pick up on others' feelings. A person who radiates positivity and warmth will make you feel more comfortable, uplifted, and open. But someone who carries negativity, frustration, bitterness, or unresolved anger can affect the atmosphere in a very different way. When an ill person enters a space, they don't necessarily have to say anything, just their presence and the energy they emit are enough to change everything around them. It's easy to dismiss the subtle shift at first because it often doesn't come with overt signs. They may smile, they may greet you with words that sound pleasant enough, but their energy is different. It's an underlying current of tension or frustration that's hard to pinpoint but hard to ignore once you start to notice it. You might feel your shoulders tense up, your stomach tighten, or suddenly you can't think clearly. The energy is no longer flowing freely, it's been interrupted. The mood is no longer light, but slightly darker, more guarded, and the space between people feels larger, even though no one has physically moved. But how does this happen? How does one person walk into a room and change everything without saying a word? It has to do with how people emit their emotions. Emotions are powerful forces. They affect our bodies, our expressions, and our behavior. When someone is negative, angry, resentful, or bitter, that energy seeps into everything they do. It's in the way they speak, the way they look at people, the way they carry themselves. It might be as subtle as a glance or a slight shift in posture, but you can feel it. It's a palpable shift in energy that comes from the way a person processes their emotions. An ill person carries the weight of their unresolved issues and unmet needs, and they unknowingly project that heaviness onto those around them. The moment they walk into a room, the energy that they bring with them starts to interact with the energy of the people who are already there. Even if people aren't aware of it consciously, their bodies react. The way you feel when you're around someone who's constantly negative or complaining is different from how you feel when you're around someone who is calm, collected, and positive. Your body picks up on these cues before your mind does. It could be as simple as how your body reacts to the tension in the air. Your muscles might tighten, your breathing might slow, or you might suddenly feel an urge to leave the room. Your instinct is telling you something's not right. That shift in energy isn't just in your mind, it's in your body too. Now, when an ill person is in the room, it's not always an overt confrontation that causes the shift. Sometimes it's the small, almost imperceptible ways in which they interact with others. Perhaps they make a passive-aggressive comment or crack a sarcastic joke that doesn't seem harmful at first, but it lingers in the air like a cloud of negativity. Other times it's the way they respond to simple situations. A simple question, a polite gesture, or an innocent comment could be met with a judgmental tone or a dismissive glance. It's those moments that shift the energy. It's the absence of kindness, the lack of empathy, or the subtle undercurrent of hostility. When people experience this shift in energy, they don't always know how to process it. It's hard to explain why the mood is suddenly dropped or why everyone feels on edge. It's like trying to explain why the weather feels off without being able to describe the exact change. People might feel the discomfort, but they can't always pinpoint its source. And that's what makes it even more dangerous. When people aren't able to identify what's causing the shift, they begin to internalize it. They start questioning their own behavior, wondering if they're the ones causing the change. That's part of the manipulation that an ill person can bring. It's an unconscious ability to disrupt the flow of positive energy and make others feel responsible for the discomfort. When you become more attuned to this energy shift, you start recognizing it in different situations. You see it when someone enters a group conversation and the mood suddenly takes a dive. It's like the wind was knocked out of everyone. The tone becomes more serious. The words become fewer. And the openness of the conversation is replaced by weariness. You see it when someone walks into a room at work and the entire office becomes quieter. People stop talking freely, their interactions become more guarded, and the workspace loses its energy. It's the subtle shift that happens when someone brings their negativity into a space. It's not just about what they say, it's about how their presence changes everything around them. This shift is what makes an ill person so hard to deal with. They can change an entire room without saying a word, without even trying. It's a power that they wield, even if they don't realize it. And for the people who are sensitive to these shifts, it can be exhausting. It becomes a battle to maintain your own positive energy while trying to navigate the negativity that has just entered the room. But it's important to understand that the ill person may not be doing this intentionally. In many cases, they don't even know they're doing it. Their unresolved issues, their frustrations, their anger, their bitterness are so deeply ingrained in them that it's all they know. And when they enter a room, they bring all of that with them, whether they mean to or not. When you start to notice this subtle energy shift, it becomes easier to spot when an ill person is in your midst. They are the ones who, without saying anything, can transform a joyful gathering into something heavy and difficult. They don't need to scream. They don't need to argue. They just need to be present. And when they are, it's like everything you've worked for, every positive thought, every uplifting conversation begins to deflate. The worst part is sometimes you won't even know why. You might be caught in the middle of a great time with friends, only to feel the entire mood shift the moment they arrive. The conversation goes cold, the laughter stops, and everyone is suddenly on guard. Learning to recognize this subtle energy shift can save you a lot of emotional distress. Once you understand the impact of an ill person's energy, you can protect yourself from its effects. You can learn to shield yourself from their negativity, or at the very least avoid engaging with it. It's about being aware of how your body and mind are reacting to their presence and learning how to keep your own energy intact. You can't change them, but you can change how you respond to them. It's also important to realize that you don't have to let the energy shift take over your space. You can work to redirect the energy, shift it back into a more positive flow. This requires strength, awareness, and sometimes the courage to confront the negativity head on. If you allow yourself to be swayed by the energy an ill person brings into the room, you've already given up control. But if you can recognize that shift, accept that it's happening, and choose not to let it dominate the space, then you've taken back the power. You become the one who sets the tone, not them. You become the one who determines the mood of the room. This subtle shift is a reflection of how we all interact with each other on a deeper level than we realize. It's a reminder that we don't just communicate through words, but through energy. And when someone's energy is toxic, it doesn't take much to make the entire room feel it. It's not something that can always be explained, but once you start recognizing it, you'll understand just how powerful it can be. There are times when you meet someone, and on the surface, everything seems fine. They seem kind, polite, and maybe even warm, but as you dig a little deeper, something doesn't quite add up. It's not the way they look, or the things they say exactly, it's the way their words and actions don't align. You may hear them say one thing, but their behavior tells an entirely different story. They tell you how much they care about your success, how they support you, how they want to see you thrive, but then you notice that their actions don't mirror these words. The kindness they speak is absent when it comes to their behavior. This disconnect, this discrepancy between what is said and what is done, is one of the clearest indicators that something is off. Words in and of themselves carry a lot of weight. They can uplift, they can comfort, they can reassure. But words without the backing of authentic action are just that empty, hollow noises. People often say what they think you want to hear, what sounds good in the moment. But when it's time to show up, when it's time to back up those words with actions, they falter. This is especially true when dealing with someone who isn't being genuine. The moment their words don't align with their behavior, the cracks in their character start to show. It's an interesting thing, the way people often think they can get away with this. They say things that sound like support. They offer help. They give compliments, but their actions betray them. A simple example, someone who tells you they want the best for you, but never once asks about your goals, your progress, or your dreams. They talk about how much they support you, but when it comes time to actually help you, they're nowhere to be found. Perhaps they never offer any tangible assistance when you're struggling, or when you ask for advice, they brush it off with vague responses. The gap between what they say and what they do grows wider every time you engage with them. And the more you pay attention to it, the more apparent it becomes that the words they say are just a performance, a mask they wear to create an illusion. But it's not always as obvious. Sometimes the disconnect is more subtle, woven into their everyday interactions. Maybe they're quick to offer compliments, but when it comes time to follow through on a promise, they pull away. They might tell you they'll be there for you, but when you reach out, you're met with silence. This creates a feeling of uncertainty. Their words are so smooth, so convincing, but their actions leave you second-guessing everything. How could someone say one thing and do another? And why does it seem like they don't realize the damage they're doing? The truth is, people who don't align their words and actions are often very skilled at creating a facade. They know how to say the right things, how to present themselves in the best light. But this facade is fragile. It's held up by the illusion they create through their words, which are often just distractions from the truth of their behavior. The more they talk, the more they try to convince you of their sincerity, the more you start to notice that something doesn't match up. This is because actions don't lie. No matter how convincing their words may sound, their behavior eventually tells the real story. If someone claims to be loyal but continually lets you down, their words become meaningless. If someone says they care but never shows up when you need them, you begin to question whether they truly mean it. Another element of this disconnect is the way it affects relationships, whether they're personal or professional. In personal relationships, when words and actions don't align, trust starts to erode. Trust is built on consistency, the consistency between what someone says and what they do. When there's a gap between these two, it creates confusion, doubt, and insecurity. The person may say, "I love you," or "I care about you," but if their actions speak differently, if they're dismissive, selfish, or even indifferent, you start to feel that these words are empty. They lose their power because you can see that the person isn't willing to back them up with real actions. It's the same in professional settings. Someone may tell you they're a team player, that they're invested in your success and the success of the group, but their behavior tells you a different story. They may take credit for your ideas or fail to deliver on promises or act in ways that undercut your progress. The words they speak create one impression, while their actions create another. Over time, this discrepancy builds resentment. You begin to feel like you've been misled, that you've been the target of manipulation. And once trust is broken, it's difficult to rebuild. The problem with people who don't align their words with their actions is that it's easy to get caught in their web. They are often very charming and convincing, and in the beginning, their words might seem like enough. They know exactly what to say to make you believe in them. They might tell you what you want to hear, promising support, offering encouragement, or speaking about their admiration for your abilities. And at first, you buy into it. You believe them because their words sound genuine, and you want to believe that people are good, that they will act in accordance with what they say. But over time, the lack of action starts to reveal the truth. You start to see the pattern, the promises that are never kept, the compliments that feel hollow, the kindness that isn't backed up with real effort. This is when the confusion sets in. You begin to question your judgment. Was it something you misunderstood? Did you misinterpret their words? Or is it possible that they were never sincere to begin with? People who don't align their words and actions often create this confusion on purpose. They want you to doubt yourself. They want you to question whether they truly meant it or not. This is the core of manipulation, the ability to keep someone unsure of the reality they're living in, to keep them constantly seeking reassurance. There are certain tactics that people who don't align their words and actions often use to maintain this illusion. One common tactic is deflection. If you point out that their actions don't align with what they said, they might respond by deflecting, turning the conversation back on you, or shifting blame to others. They might say things like, well, I didn't have the time, or I didn't think it was that important. They might try to make you feel guilty for even questioning them, twisting the narrative to make it seem like you're the one at fault for noticing the inconsistency. They might also employ the tactic of gaslighting, convincing you that your perception of reality is wrong. If you tell them that you feel let down by their actions, they'll insist that you're overreacting or that you've misunderstood their intentions. This is another form of manipulation. They want to keep the focus off of their lack of action and instead make you doubt your feelings and your understanding of the situation. Over time, this can make you feel like you're losing touch with your own judgment, and it can create a dangerous cycle where you second-guess yourself at every turn. In addition to gaslighting and deflection, there's also the issue of inconsistencies over time. At first, they might try to be on their best behavior, making promises they keep, offering support they follow through on. But slowly, as they realize they don't have to continue proving themselves, their actions start to slip. The compliments become less frequent, the promises more empty, and the support disappears. But they still say the right things just enough to keep you hanging on, just enough to make you doubt your own conclusions. It's like a slow, creeping realization that you're being strung along by words that have no weight behind them. The sad truth is that some people who live this way never truly understand the harm they cause. They've gotten so accustomed to saying whatever needs to be said to maintain a certain image or to get what they want that they don't realize the damage they're doing to the trust of others. And the longer this pattern continues, the more difficult it becomes for those around them to trust anything they say. Words lose their meaning when they are never backed by actions. Once someone proves that their words are just that empty words, the bond between them and anyone else begins to deteriorate. People stop believing in what they say, and the relationship, whether personal or professional, starts to crumble. As time passes, the discrepancy between what they say and what they do becomes harder to ignore. The cracks in the facade become wider, and the truth becomes impossible to avoid. When someone's words and actions don't align, it is only a matter of time before the facade collapses and the true character of the person is revealed. The problem is that when someone has mastered the art of saying the right things at the right time, it can take longer for the truth to emerge. But once it does, once you've seen the pattern long enough, you begin to realize that the disconnect is not accidental. It's intentional. It's manipulation. And the only way to protect yourself is to trust what you see, not just what you hear. The truth is in the actions. Always. When dealing with a person who manipulates others and positions themselves as a victim, the patterns can be insidious, almost invisible to the untrained eye. These individuals have a unique ability to craft narratives that not only paint themselves as the innocent party, but also cast others as the source of their struggles, confusion, and misfortune. It's a delicate dance of manipulation, where the lines between truth and fiction become blurred, and the person weaves a web that traps others, making them feel guilty, responsible, or obligated to help. In the world of manipulation and victimhood, the manipulator becomes both the protagonist and the martyr, and anyone around them is a potential villain or a mere pawn in their emotional game. The cycle often begins subtly, almost innocuously. The manipulator may start with small, seemingly harmless complaints. They might express dissatisfaction with their circumstances, stating that things haven't worked out for them, or that life seems to be unfair. These complaints might seem like normal expressions of frustration, but they are the beginning of a carefully laid plan to elicit sympathy or gain control. Over time, these complaints grow more elaborate, and the manipulator starts to draw attention to the perceived injustice that they are experiencing. They may use phrases like, "Why does this always happen to me?" Or "I just can't catch a break," slowly positioning themselves as the victim in the narrative of their life. At first, the people around them may feel sympathy. They want to help, they want to support the individual who seems to be struggling against a series of unfortunate events. The manipulator capitalizes on this sympathy, reinforcing the idea that they are, in fact, a victim of circumstances beyond their control. They may start to tell stories of betrayal, disappointment, or hardship, all of which position them as the helpless party in a world that has wronged them. Their ability to weave a tale of woe is one of the primary tools they use to manipulate those around them. The more convincing their narrative, the easier it becomes for others to buy into their victimhood. However, as the pattern continues, the manipulator's behavior becomes more transparent. They may continue to spin tales of suffering, but their actions don't match up with their words. Their life remains stagnant, and the problems they claim to have never seemed to improve. The manipulation becomes more obvious as the individual repeatedly portrays themselves as powerless in the face of obstacles, yet they do nothing to actively solve their own problems. This is where the manipulation deepens, because even when given advice, support, or opportunities to change, the manipulator refuses to take responsibility for their own actions. Instead, they rely on others to fix their problems or to constantly reassure them that everything will be okay. They manipulate the situation so that others become the ones who feel responsible for their outcomes. The next layer of manipulation often involves guilt. As the manipulator continues to play the victim, they may begin to subtly suggest or directly accuse others of being the reason for their difficulties. They might say things like, "If you had only helped me when I asked," or, "You never really understand how hard things are for me." This makes others feel guilty for not offering more support or for not providing the solutions the manipulator is seeking. The guilt is the emotional weapon that keeps the cycle going, pushing people into a position where they feel compelled to continue helping, often at their own expense. It's a clever manipulation tactic because the person being manipulated doesn't realize that their own emotional resources are being drained until they are completely spent. Another tactic frequently employed by manipulators is the use of isolation. As their victimhood narrative continues, the manipulator may create an environment in which they are the only person who can truly understand their pain. They might alienate their potential supporters by framing them as uncaring, untrustworthy, or indifferent. In some cases, the manipulator may try to turn others against each other, suggesting that people are speaking behind their backs or not being honest with them. This keeps them in a perpetual state of emotional dependence on the person or people they are manipulating, making it harder for anyone to break free from the cycle. This isolation fosters a sense of superiority in the manipulator, who believes that only they understand the depths of their own suffering and that only they are truly capable of feeling the weight of their struggles. The manipulator also thrives on creating drama, often escalating small issues into larger, more complex conflicts. Over time, the person being manipulated may begin to feel emotionally drained, used, and frustrated. The constant cycle of giving, helping, and supporting someone who never seems to take any real responsibility for their life becomes demoralizing. The manipulator may continually promise that they will change or that they will start taking action, but these promises are rarely fulfilled. Instead, they remain stuck in their victimhood, waiting for others to come to their rescue, and never growing beyond the narrative they've created for themselves. The worst part about being caught in this manipulation is that the victim, those closest to the manipulator, often don't realize they're being used. They feel like they're doing the right thing by offering support, but they become trapped in a cycle of constant emotional caretaking, where their own needs and feelings are continually neglected. They begin to question their own boundaries, wondering if they're doing enough, if they're being selfish by not helping more. The manipulator, through their words and their actions, has expertly turned the situation into one where the people who are trying to help end up feeling guilty and responsible for the manipulator's ongoing struggles. Eventually, breaking free from this cycle requires recognizing the patterns of manipulation and taking steps to assert boundaries. The manipulator can only continue their narrative of victimhood as long as others allow it to continue. Once the people around them begin to see the manipulation for what it is, an emotional ploy designed to keep them in control, they can begin to step back, reestablish their own sense of autonomy, and refuse to be caught in the cycle of guilt, responsibility, and false martyrdom. But breaking free from this kind of manipulation is difficult. It requires self-awareness, strength, and a willingness to face the discomfort of confronting the manipulator and their false narratives. Emotional drain is a silent but powerful force that can significantly impact an individual's well-being. It doesn't always happen overnight, but over time, repeated exposure to certain situations where people can leave a person feeling empty, exhausted, and overwhelmed. Emotional drain doesn't just stem from dealing with traumatic events or major life stressors. It can also arise from subtle, persistent interactions that chip away at one's energy, confidence, and sense of self. One of the most insidious sources of emotional drain is the inability or unwillingness to set proper boundaries. Without healthy boundaries, a person can find themselves constantly giving, constantly pouring energy into others, only to be left feeling depleted. The process of boundary setting is not just about saying no to others, but it is also about honoring and respecting oneself, recognizing when emotional energy is being drained, and actively taking steps to preserve one's mental and emotional health. When emotional drain occurs, it often feels like there is no relief, no space to recharge. It can manifest in various ways: feeling physically tired despite having adequate rest, experiencing mood swings, feeling irritable or anxious, or even becoming disconnected from one's emotions. It's as though there is a constant undercurrent of exhaustion that lingers, and it's difficult to pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. At times, it feels like a slow burn, and it's hard to realize just how much energy has been lost until one finds themselves at the brink of emotional burnout. The lack of boundaries is a primary contributor to emotional drain. Without boundaries, people often find themselves giving more than they should, whether it's offering time, emotional support, or even physical energy. It's common to put others' needs before your own, to overextend yourself to ensure that others are comfortable, or to feel obligated to meet expectations, even if it means sacrificing your own well-being. In the absence of boundaries, these actions become habitual, almost reflexive. The more you give without setting clear limits, the more others will expect, and the cycle of emotional drain deepens. The challenge comes when people are unable to recognize that they are being drained emotionally. This often happens in situations where there is an imbalance in the relationship dynamics. For example, in friendships, family relationships, or work environments, one person may consistently take from the other without giving anything in return. The person who is being drained may feel like they are doing the right thing by offering support, but over time, they may begin to feel resentful, neglected, or unappreciated. This is the emotional drain at work. It's a form of imbalance that goes unnoticed until it begins to manifest physically and emotionally. This is where the importance of boundary setting becomes clear. Healthy boundaries are not about rejecting people or being selfish. They are about ensuring that there is a balance in the exchange of energy between individuals. When someone establishes boundaries, they create space for their own needs to be respected and fulfilled, while also honoring the needs of others. Boundaries help to maintain emotional health by providing the necessary distance to recharge, by allowing the individual to take a step back when they feel overwhelmed, and by making it clear when they need time or space to themselves. Setting boundaries begins with understanding that one's emotional and mental well-being is a priority. It means recognizing that it is not selfish to say no when something feels too much or when a request feels draining. It's about knowing that it's okay to prioritize your own needs just as much as you prioritize the needs of others. But for many people, boundary setting is not an easy task. It can be difficult to say no because there is a fear of disappointing others or a fear of appearing rude or uncaring. People often feel guilty when they set boundaries, as if they are not being good friends, family members, or co-workers. This guilt can make it even harder to establish and maintain boundaries, and as a result, they continue to give in to requests and demands, leading to emotional burnout. One of the key aspects of setting boundaries is recognizing the different types of boundaries that exist. Boundaries are not one size fits all. They can be physical, emotional, mental, or even time-related. For example, physical boundaries might include setting limits on how close someone can get to you, or how much physical touch you are comfortable with. Emotional boundaries might involve protecting yourself from being overly involved in someone else's emotional turmoil or not taking on their emotional burdens as your own. Mental boundaries involve being able to separate your thoughts and ideas from others, recognizing that you are not obligated to agree with or internalize every opinion that is expressed to you. Time boundaries are equally important, as they involve setting limits on how much time and energy you are willing to dedicate to something or someone else, recognizing when your own time needs to be protected for rest or personal pursuits. These different types of boundaries are often interconnected, and neglecting one area can lead to emotional drain in others. For instance, if a person constantly overextends themselves by taking on the emotional weight of others, it can eventually impact their physical health, as they may become fatigued or overwhelmed. Similarly, if someone is constantly giving up their time to help others without carving out time for themselves, they may feel like they have no time to focus on their own needs, leading to frustration or resentment. Therefore, establishing a balance between all of these types of boundaries is essential to maintaining emotional health. One common challenge when setting boundaries is the fear of conflict. Many people avoid establishing boundaries because they fear how others will react. They worry that their relationships will be damaged or that they will be perceived as cold or distant. This fear often stems from a deep-seated desire for approval or the belief that they must always put others first in order to be liked or accepted. But the truth is, setting healthy boundaries is essential for maintaining healthy relationships. When boundaries are respected, relationships can become stronger, as they allow individuals to show up as their authentic selves, free from the pressure to constantly meet the needs of others. Another factor that makes boundary setting difficult is the tendency to people please. People pleasing is a pattern of behavior where individuals prioritize the needs and desires of others over their own. It often arises from a desire for validation or fear of rejection. People pleasers tend to avoid conflict at all costs, and they may say yes to things they don't want to do, just to avoid disappointing others. Unfortunately, this leads to emotional drain because it's impossible to constantly say yes without compromising one's own needs. People-pleasing behavior can lead to feelings of resentment, burnout, and a sense of being taken for granted as the individual sacrifices their own well-being for the sake of others. In contrast, people who have learned to set boundaries are more likely to experience emotional balance. They recognize that their needs are just as important as the needs of others, and they are willing to assert themselves when necessary. Setting boundaries requires practice and self-awareness, but it is an empowering process. When individuals set boundaries, they are not only protecting themselves from emotional drain, but they are also teaching others how to treat them with respect. Boundaries allow for more genuine connections because they help to establish clear expectations and avoid misunderstandings. The emotional drain that comes from not setting boundaries can also manifest in other areas of life, such as work. In the workplace, individuals may feel pressured to take on more tasks than they can handle, or to always say yes to additional work, even when it interferes with their personal time or well-being. This often stems from a fear of letting others down, or the belief that they must prove their worth by constantly being available and accommodating. However, this pattern can quickly lead to burnout. The more someone neglects their own limits and continues to say yes, the more likely they are to feel resentful, exhausted, and emotionally overwhelmed. Setting boundaries at work is essential not only for personal well-being, but also for long-term career success. A person who knows their limits is more likely to perform at a high level, as they will be able to prioritize tasks and manage their energy effectively. In relationships, emotional drain is a result of overextending oneself, taking on the emotional burdens of others, and failing to communicate one's needs. Whether in romantic relationships, friendships, or family dynamics, it's important to recognize when you are feeling drained and to address the issue before it becomes overwhelming. This might involve having difficult conversations with others about your needs, your limits, and your desire to maintain a healthy balance in the relationship. Boundaries in relationships are essential for maintaining emotional health and for creating space for mutual respect and understanding. Emotional drain is not something that happens overnight. It is a slow, insidious process that takes place over time when boundaries are not respected or established. Setting boundaries is the antidote to emotional drain. By recognizing your own needs, asserting your limits, and taking steps to protect your emotional and physical well-being, you can prevent burnout and create healthier, more balanced relationships. Boundaries are not about being selfish, they are about self-respect. Setting boundaries allows individuals to honor themselves, to ensure that their emotional needs are met, and to preserve their energy for the things and people that matter most.